First race of the weekend for Division 1 sees Ryan Smith on pole position, David Jenkins alongside. Row 2, Richard Collett, great to see him back with us. Then Mark Taylor, followed by John Newell and another returnee, Ray Coleman. So the hot half dozen about to be unleashed in hot weather conditions here at Thruxton. Get ready for lights out. The race is underway, so Ryan Smith on pole, but it's a good start by David Jenkins, who leads around the outside into Allard. Ryan Smith's teammate is up into third place, that's Mark Taylor. Richard Collett is fourth, but it's the Digraph Hiab sponsored Jenkins Truck Sport machine that leads into the complex for the first time from Ryan Smith. Richard Collett is third. Richard's got ahead now. It's a good start from Richard Collett ahead of Mark Taylor. John Newell getting very close indeed to Taylor. He's going to look on the outside line as they come out of Seagrave for the first time, heading out of Seagrave down towards the left-hander at Noble, then the continuing right-hander Goodwood Village, ultimately into Church, and then back up the hill. But having lost from pole, Ryan Smith is on a complete mission to take the battle to David Jenkins. But that was a superb start by Jenkins, the former champion, leading the current and multiple champion, who's looking down the inside line now as they head through Village for the first time in this race. It's a 15-minute race here, and Jenkins the leader, but look at the pressure that Ryan Smith is putting on. He's got his wipers on, a bit of water coming off, water-cooled brakes no doubt, onto the windshield of the number one truck. The big climb up Woodham Hill. So David Jenkins is the leader, and I've got to say, not under massive pressure at the moment. Richard Collett third, Mark Taylor still holding on to fourth position. Taylor has had podia at both of the events, in one race per event. He's not going to get one here though, because John Newell is about to demote him in fourth place round the outside line. And talking of outside, it's the inside at Allard for the champion, but that'll be the outside as they go into the complex here, with Jenkins side by side with Ryan Smith. Jenkins hanging on to the outside. This is great racing between the pair of them. They could have clattered, but they don't, and Jenkins held the outside line knowing he got the inside for the next corner, which he maintains. Ryan Smith takes a slightly wider sweep here to gain momentum down towards Noble. What you can't see here is that Noble is, we've already seen it on the previous lap, the left-hand corner, which means Ryan's on the outside line. Hasn't quite got the grip there to hang on to that, so tucks back in behind Jenks. Now he's going to have a little nibble down the inside line from Noble into Goodwood and Village. Is there a gap there? Ryan Smith sees the gap and goes through. Ryan Smith wrests the lead from David Jenkins on lap 2. So Jenkins' superb start meant that he held the lead for a lap and a third, I guess you would say, here around this 2.3 mile circuit. But Ryan Smith is the leader. Jenkins second now, and we'll try and chase him down. Richard Collett in third. So good to see Richard Collett getting some pace back in the HGV Direct Collett transport prepared truck, and there's a legend on the back of it. We've told you this before. It said built, not bought. I don't know if we can see it. We can't quite get close enough to see that phrase on the back of the truck, but has built that himself and has had all sorts of engine problems this year. And Rick, I think, had some health problems as well, but he's been sorting those out, and good to see him back to top form this weekend. So Ryan Smith the leader from Dave Jenkins, Richard Collett next up from John Newell. Those two, I think, are going to engage in a battle for third place here. Can't remember the last time I saw Richard Collett on the podium. I'm sure he did have them last year, but certainly this year has been abysmal for him. He turned up at Brands Hatch, had a retirement in race 1, and wasn't at Pembrey either because they wanted to sort the truck out, but they have got the engine more or less there now, still having the odd problem with it, but you can see running very well up ahead of John Newell. John's been on the podium this year. He's had a second place in race 4 at Brands, a second place in the opening race at Pembrey last time out, and then a brace of third positions as well in races 3 and 4 down in South Wales. And remember, we're back in South Wales later on in the season in October, and I love that meeting because it's full throttle. Don't get me wrong, it's full throttle all the way through the year with truck racing. But to put the calendar into perspective, we start with guns blazing and goodness knows what at Brands Hatch with the big sort of Easter weekend meeting, and then we go to Btra, which is where we kind of start to see the season settle down into a little bit of a pattern. Then we come to Thruxton, which is always a big truck festival. We're on day one here, and there's a good crowd today. This is qualifying day, and there's a good crowd you can see there on the bank for qualifying day, getting a taster of the racing ready for 3 big races tomorrow. And then it's the big overseas trip to the Nürburgring, which is a massive truck meeting. So that's our 4th event of the year, as John Newell locks up in the chase of Richard Collett. Following that, it's the convoy in the park, which is a huge meeting at Donington Park. And as I say, most of the meetings are huge. But anyway, after Donington, we go to Snetterton, which is growing in stature year by year, with the MSV team doing more and more promotion year by year at Snetterton, which is another super meeting up there in Norfolk. And that's the anti-penultimate event of the year, because then we go to Btra, and the point I was getting at is that you have all these high, not that Btra isn't a high-profile event, it is, and they get great crowds, but oh, look at John Newell getting drifting very much there in 4th position, and that is just trying to do everything that he can to close in on Richard Collett as we approach the halfway stage of this race. Going back to the Btra, the penultimate event of the year, it's vitally important points-wise, of course, for everybody that's there. But in terms of the big nature of some of the events, there's just it's a little bit of a time to just take stock a little bit before we head back to Brands Hatch for the finale, which is the big firework meeting. And I think the calendar is absolutely superb. Talk about us going back to Silverstone again, which will be mega, as Ricky Collett straight lines the chicane. Won't want to do that too much because he'll wind up with a penalty. Dave Jenkins still in 2nd position, Ryan Smith the race leader. Ryan coming into this race only 3 points clear of David Jenkins in the championship. Ryan with 5 wins, David Jenkins with 2. Stuart Oliver has the other race win, which was the 2nd race at Brands Hatch, the first reverse grid race at Brands Hatch earlier on in the year. And Oliver 5th in the championship standings. He'll lose that to Ray Coleman in this race. Good to see Ray Coleman back with us as well. Ray doing a partial campaign this year. But Ryan Smith on 118 points, 3 points clear of David Jenkins, who is 16 points ahead of John Newell. And John's going to lose out a little bit here if Richard Collett maintains podium pace here. That's why John needs to climb up. The points system, I'm sure you don't need telling, but it's 15 points for a win, 14 for 2nd and so on, down to 1 point for 15th place, and an additional bonus point for fastest lap in each race, which at the moment, let's have a quick gander, Ryan Smith on lap 4, 1 minute 38.009, an average of 86.53. Now bear in mind that the trucks are only allowed to do a maximum of 100 miles an hour, although clearly can't do 100 miles an hour all the way around the track, because you've got to brake here and turn here as well into the chicane and at the complex. So, but that is a very, very fast time by Ryan Smith. David Jenkins' best lap was on lap 4 as well, 38.053. So literally only hundredths of a second slower than Ryan Smith, who is out front. And you can see they're fairly evenly matched because we're at the halfway stage of the race, and those two boys still very much together. And if there's the slightest of problems with the number 1 truck, the man from Mansfield could lose the lead to David Jenkins, who closes up, under braking into the complex. Jenkins is responding, and Jenks will know from that great start that he did that he potentially has the pace to take the battle back to Ryan Smith in this fastest off the front race. Race format, I remind you, 4 races per weekend. The first race is the grid determined by qualifying with the fastest off the front, and then we take the result of this race, reverse the result, and that forms the grid for race 2, and we do the same again for race 4. So races 2 and 4 are reverse grid races. At the end of the meeting, we tend to, depending on the number of trucks, if we're able to run all of the trucks from the combined divisions 1 and 2 together, we will do so. But at the moment, the early part of the meeting, great idea to give everybody their own track space and bed themselves into the meeting as best they can. These two clear though. What work of these two, the development work that's been done on those two trucks. There is Mark Taylor, who's running still strongly. Don't think it's going to be a podium for Mark today. He is still having a good run though. We saw a brief glimpse of Richard Collett still running in third place. This is going to be a really good start to the meeting for Richard Collett. Ray Coleman back with us in the Lantern truck in sixth place. As I said, a limited campaign for him. Busy chasing Mark Taylor at the moment, so Mark will be his first target. And Ray had a podium in the, was it fourth race at Brands Hatch, wasn't it? With a retirement in race one, so that hit his points fairly early on. But telling me today we're going to see him at the Nürburgring this year as well, and a couple of other rounds. I'm sure we'll see him at the finale. Of course, the Brands Hatch rounds tend to attract some overseas entries as well, which makes things a little bit busier, particularly on the reverse grid races. John Newell closing in on Richard Collett. Those two fighting for race position as well as no, I was going to say as well as championship position. That's ridiculous because John Newell's third in the championship. But we'll break the 100-point barrier here, John Newell, as we go back to Ryan Smith, still there from David Jenkins. No improvement on lap times from those guys. But this potentially, I think, the closest that any of the trucks are on track. So we're looking at third, fourth, fifth and sixth, all in shot, but plenty of space between them at the moment. Collett coming up the hill. All of our field MANs of varying description. Ryan Smith's an MAN TGA, David Jenkins in TGX, both, all of the trucks 12-litre engines, as John Newell continues on his way. So Richard Collett clear, as well as having the speed. What's going to be key for Richard Collett is going to be reliability. John Newell still there. I'm just looking through at John Newell's results over the course of the season. 8 races, 8 finishes. And John's worst result, lock up there from Mark Taylor in the 81. Going back to John Newell's results, his worst results were Brands Hatch, 3 fifth places to kick the season off, and then banged in a second place, which you almost feel results-wise kick-started his season with race 4 at Brands Hatch, then another second position at Pembrey, 4th position race 2 at Pembrey, and then has not been far away from the podium. So this to me looks all pretty much settled at the moment. We're heading in towards the, we're in the last third of the race just about, and Ryan Smith, look at David Jenkins, gets the drift on there. He really is trying everything to reel in Ryan Smith. Still plenty of time season-wise to do it, but the Jenkins Truck Sport TGX just cannot do anything about Ryan at the moment. So back with John Newell and Mark Taylor. I wonder if Mark seems to be getting a little bit closer. Here is David Jenkins at work again, coming through the chicane. If you've not been to Thruxton before, highly recommend the banking where you can see the spectators sitting there. Also the grandstand. I think if you pay a couple of extra quid, you can maybe, if you're lucky at the big events, find a grandstand seat, and it's worth it because it's a great view of the cars or trucks coming up Woodham Hill into the club chicane and then sweeping around into the start-finish area. Tempted to say start-finish straight, but it isn't straight, as you'll see from the shots here. It is a curve which leads round into Allard. Allard leads round into this complex where they are now. David Jenkins exits Seagrave, that complex named after some of the fastest men who have lived, of course, Campbell, Cobb and Seagrave. Then down into Noble, continuing the trend of land speed record holders, before they get to Goodwood, Village, Brooklands, all very evocative motorsport names. And John Newell is being closed down on now by Mark Taylor. So we've got a little bit of a battle on here. I don't know if John Newell is struggling. And Mark Taylor looking on the inside line. This is the scrap for 4th place. And Taylor leading on him, getting very close indeed. He's doing what Ryan Smith did earlier on. Finds the inside line as they head to the outer reaches of the track. Sadly leave that battle and go back with Ryan Smith, who is still very much in command of this race, and Mark Taylor showing great truck control there, getting it sideways, but John Newell hangs on. Gracious, really close stuff. Here comes Ryan Smith now onto his last lap of this opening race, and he's clear by 7 seconds as they cross the line from David Jenkins in P2. It's going to be good points for Jenkins, and that's all he needs to do really. At the moment, he might not have the truck beneath him to beat Ryan Smith. He certainly did off the line, but not in the race. So all he can do therefore is bring that machine home in second position. He'll lose a point, 15 points for the win, 14 for second, and he'll lose a point for fastest lap as well. So he'll drop 2 points on the championship. So the gap will go out to 5 points here, and he'll try and get back as Mark Taylor has now got through in front of John Newell. While I was looking at my... Oh, and locks up. He's going to throw that away again. Massive lock up, and across the grass. He was already in front, so he's not really gaining an advantage there, although John Newell might see that from a different perspective. Where is John? He's still there. But Mark Taylor, still learning the craft of truck racing, joined us at Pembrey, the second Pembrey I think it was last year, so this is his first full season. But his teammate Ryan Smith has again made no mistakes in this race, unless you want to be really pernickety and say perhaps the start where Dave Jenkins beat him away. But it's another great drive from him. There is Ray Coleman running in 6th place, but Ryan Smith heading up towards the checkered flag. Rick Collett is in 3rd, so it's Ryan Smith, Dave Jenkins, Richard Collett there in 3rd, then Mark Taylor settled now I think in 4th place. But here's the man who's going to take the checkered flag and the 15 points for the win, additional point for fastest lap. Ryan Smith flashes his lights at the finish line here and takes the win. It is 7.6 seconds the gap between Smith and David Jenkins. Richard Collett a little bit further back, a little bit of a wait before Richard comes through to complete our podium here at Pembrey. Lovely shot there of the banking and the control tower in the background, and nice shot as well. Richard Collett grabbing his first podium for a good while. First podium of the season. Return to form for Collett in 3rd, ahead of him Jenkins and Smith, behind him Taylor, Newell and Ray Coleman. Ryan Smith getting the fastest lap.
It's a great way to start the weekend, nail-biting first couple of laps.
Yeah, no, we seem to have got the truck quite sorted in the start, much improved on qualifying. Obviously much closer to Ryan, only 400ths between us for the fastest lap for the bonus point, which is annoying because he just nicked that. But unfortunately we've got to have a look at the hot tyre pace. It just fell off a cliff on lap 6, so we need to just have a look at that. But no, the truck's in one piece. It's doing a good job, and we can only be a few pound of tyre pressure away or a little bit of damper away, so we'll have a look at that overnight. And I think the ambient's going to come down a bit tomorrow, so I'm sure we'll be back out fighting in the morning.
Ricky, congratulations, podium there. That engine paid off.
Well, yeah, it held out, I'm afraid. That's a case where it were. The oil pressure light came on as we set off. It was touch and go whether it even made the start. But I thought, I'm here. We'll risk it. But I don't think it's going to last. I don't think we're going to go tomorrow.